I've never been one to get involved in the neighbors' lives, you know? I've always thought that everyone has their problems, and that it's best to keep a certain distance. But the situation I lived last year doesn't leave my head to this day. I live on a very quiet street, those typical neighborhood where everyone at least greets each other. The house next to mine was occupied by a couple who moved there about 8 months ago, more or less. At first, they seemed very calm, but after a while, the fights began. At first they were muffled discussions, those that we even try to ignore. But over time it got worse, the screams got louder, you could hear things being thrown and doors slamming hard, almost always during the night. There was a night, I think it was a Tuesday, that things got really ugly. I was lying down trying to sleep when I started hearing them fighting again. But this time it was different. The woman screamed a lot, but it was a desperate scream, full of fear. It was no longer just an argument. I even got out of bed and went to my bedroom window to see if I saw anything. Their house was completely dark, not a light on. And suddenly, in the middle of the screams, I heard a thud, as if something very heavy had fallen. And then, total silence. A silence so strange that it even seemed wrong. I stood there at the window for a few minutes, waiting for some movement, but nothing happened. No light came on, no one left, nothing. I tried to convince myself that it was better not to get involved, but the truth is that I was restless all night. The next day, early in the morning, I took a look through the window to see if there was any movement. The neighbor's car, which used to be parked in the garage, wasn't there. I found it strange, because they practically didn't leave the house during the week. I watched for a while, but I didn't see anyone coming in or out. So I decided to knock on their door, just to see if everything was okay. I knocked about 3 times, waited, called, but no one answered. It was as if the house was completely empty. But still, it gave a strange feeling, as if there was someone inside listening to me. The following days were even weirder. No sign of life in that house. The lights were still off, the car never showed up again, and the post office accumulated mail at the gate. And that's when, about 3 days later, I saw a guy I've never seen before entering the back garage. He was wearing an old t-shirt and dirty jeans. He looked like someone hired for something. But there was no change plate, no truck, or anything. He entered alone, and began to carry some furniture outside, throwing everything anyway in an old truck. It was as if he was emptying the house quietly. I didn't see anyone from the family. No explanation, no goodbye. They simply disappeared. At that moment, curiosity mixed with concern began to corrode me. I stood at the window, watching that guy carry boxes, sofas, even an entire bookshelf, all without the slightest care. And the strangest thing was that he seemed nervous. He kept looking to the sides all the time, as if he was doing something wrong. I thought about calling the police, but I didn't really know what to say. I mean, technically, it could be someone authorized, right? But deep down, something told me that there was something very wrong going on there. After a couple of hours, he finished loading the truck, got into the car and left without looking back. The house became even more empty, with the windows open and curtains swaying in the wind. That night I almost didn't sleep. I kept turning over in bed, imagining 1,000 different things. Had there been any tragedy in there? Was that scream I heard the worst? I tried to rationalize, but every time I closed my eyes, that memory of absolute silence came after the scream. It wasn't normal, and the worst thing was the feeling that I might have heard something serious and done nothing. The next day, I took courage and asked other neighbors if they knew what had happened. Everyone said the same thing. No one saw anything, no one knew anything. It was as if that house had been erased from the street overnight. After that day, the house was completely abandoned. During the week, some papers stuck to the gate began to appear, a real estate thing, as if they were trying to sell the property. But it didn't even have an official ad. It seemed like it was all done in a hurry. Every time I passed in front, I got a strange chill, that feeling that something was still in there, standing, watching. Sometimes I swore to hear some snaps coming from inside during the night, as if someone was walking slowly through the empty house. I tried to ignore it, convince myself that it was just the structure of the old house creaking, but it was hard not to think of the worst after what I had witnessed. One day, after a couple of weeks of their disappearance, I saw another car stop in front of the house. He was a guy in a tie, one of those who looked like a real estate broker. He went down, stared at the facade for a few minutes, and then entered with a key. I stayed at the window watching. He walked around the house, opened some windows, took some pictures, and kept fiddling with his cell phone. The only thing that caught my attention was that, at a certain moment, he stopped right in the middle of the room, was staring at some point inside, as if he had seen or felt something. He stood still for a few seconds, and then simply left, very fast, as if he were uncomfortable. That reaction of his only increased the weird feeling that had already been stuck to me for days. I kept wondering if he had also felt the heavy climate of that house, as if the air inside had been stuck since the last fight I heard. After that, I never saw anyone entering there again. Neither buyers nor employees, nothing. The house was simply abandoned, as if everyone preferred to pretend that it didn't even exist. Some nights, when the silence of the street was total, I thought I heard something coming from there, like a sound of dragging furniture or dry beats, but always so low that I began to doubt if it wasn't something in my head. There was a dawn that marked me in a different way. I woke up for no reason. It was about 3 in the morning, and without thinking properly, I went to my bedroom window. When I looked at the house next door, I saw that the garage door was wide open. There was no wind that night, and I was sure that the guy who took the furniture had locked everything when he left. I stared for a while, hoping to see some movement, but there was only darkness inside. Suddenly, I felt such a strong chill that it forced me to close the curtain and run back to bed. It was the first time I felt a real, physical fear, as if something was watching me from inside that darkness. After this morning, I started to avoid it until I passed near that house. I changed the route just so I wouldn't have to look in her direction. It was as if the place had absorbed all the bad energy of that last night of fight. And the most bizarre thing is that, even abandoned, sometimes I felt as if there was someone watching me from inside, especially when I left home early, still at dawn. It was that horrible feeling of being watched, you know? The whole street looked normal, except that piece. The weather changed. Even the neighborhood dogs, who used to bark for anything, began to avoid the sidewalk in front of the house. Time went by and things got colder a little, but the house was still there, closed, fallen, like a strange hole in the middle of the street. No renovation, no new residents, nothing. Once in a while, some curious person would stop to take a look, but I've never seen anyone really interested. And me? I could never forget what I heard that morning, the scream, the silence, and the disappearance. To this day, when I remember, I still feel that chill going up my spine. And the worst part is this feeling that something happened right on my side, and that I will never know the truth. As if the house had swallowed everything and everyone, and stood there, standing still, just waiting. What scares me the most is that, from time to time, I still have nightmares with that scream. In the dream, I'm lying in my bed and I hear the sound coming from the house next door. But when I try to get up to see, my body doesn't move. I stay there, stuck, listening to doors slamming, things breaking, until everything ends in that brutal silence. I wake up in a cold sweat, with my heart racing, looking to the side and hoping, I don't know, to see something in the window. But there's never anything. Just the unbearable feeling that I could have done something, anything, and I didn't. Guilt and fear have been together since that night. To this day, no one knows how to properly explain what happened to that family. Some say they moved in a hurry because of debts, others talk about something heavier, but the truth is that no one is sure of anything. And I just know that after that night, that street was never the same for me. Every time I pass in front of the old house, I have anguish that is difficult to explain. As if that last dawn was still stuck in the walls, echoing somewhere we can't see. Just feel. And you? Have you ever witnessed a bizarre situation and wondered until today what really happened? I've never been too bothered by party noise, even more so on a Saturday night. Living in a residential neighborhood, we already get used to loud music, people talking loudly, these things. So when I saw that the house next door had been rented by a group of young people, I thought it would be just another one of those messy and noisy nights. Since the beginning of the afternoon, they were already there, bringing speakers, bags of drinks, and laughing out loud. When it got dark, the party exploded for good. The music hit hard on the walls, the voices mixed in screams, laughter, people running in the backyard. It looked like one of those movie parties. Around 2 in the morning, I was still awake, unable to sleep properly because of the noise, but honestly, I wasn't so angry. It was a fun sound, you know, of young people enjoying. But out of nowhere, everything changed. The music stopped at once, as if someone had pulled the wire out of the socket. In the same second, I heard a scream that made me freeze in bed. It was a girl, screaming in a desperate way, as if she was seeing something horrible. After that, nothing. No sound. No step. No voice. Only a heavy, almost suffocating silence that took over the entire street. I tried to hear some noise coming from inside the house, some movement, but there was nothing. The house was in the dark, completely silent, as if everyone had disappeared. I looked out the window, hoping to see some light, someone leaving, any sign of life, but the street was in absolute silence. I stood there, lying down, motionless, trying to understand what had happened. What was that scream? And why had the party stopped so abruptly? I couldn't get the image of the girl screaming out of my head. I only thought about the worst, but I didn't know what to do. I was afraid to go there, but at the same time, I felt that I should know what was really happening. It was only when the sun began to rise that I decided to take action. I got out of bed, took my cell phone, and called the police. I didn't know what to say, but I knew something was wrong. The feeling that something very bad had happened was consuming me. When the police arrived, they began to investigate what seemed to be another crazy party that had gone wrong. But when they entered the house and did a thorough search, what they found was something that none of us could imagine. There were no signs of fighting or violence, but what they discovered in the living room left me speechless. The house was empty, but not in a normal way. It was as if time had stopped. The police found the room completely out of place, as if someone had tried to fix everything quickly, but had not succeeded. In the middle of the room, there were broken bottles, chairs turned, but the strangest thing was the wall clock that was stopped exactly at 3:17 in the morning, as if it had frozen at that moment. But what disturbed me the most was the smell. A strong smell of something burned, as if something had caught fire, but there were no signs of fire. They searched the rest of the house and didn't find a single person. None of the young people I had heard during the night were there. The kitchen was clean, the rooms empty, and the back door was open, but with no trace of who had left there. The only thing that seemed out of place was the atmosphere, as if the house was in a state of waiting, frozen in time. The most disturbing came later, when one of the policemen entered the basement. When he went back up, with an empty and pale look, I felt a cold running down my spine. He didn't say anything, he just turned around and went straight to the door. When I asked what was down there, he just shook his head and said it didn't make sense. The police didn't find anyone else, but the mystery only increased. Where was everyone? And what happened after that girl's scream? I never knew the answer, and to this day I can't forget that policeman's look, as if he had seen something he couldn't explain, something much darker than any party could have been. That house was closed for months after that. No reform, no one else showed up there. The neighborhood, which used to be full of life and movement, seemed more empty, as if that event had sucked all the energy of the place. To this day, when I pass by, a strange feeling hits me, as if something was watching, waiting. I really don't know what happened that night, but something tells me that the things that were inside weren't what they looked like. And the worst part, that girl's scream still echoes in my head. And you, have you ever lived a situation in which you felt that something was terribly wrong, but you could never explain? What do you think happened in that house? I always knew there was something strange in that house next door. The lady and her son, an adult man, had lived there for years, and there was always some fight going on. It was not unusual to hear screams, doors slamming, or even furniture being thrown against the walls. Everyone on the street was already used to it, so no one got involved. But what happened that night? Well, that was different. I was lying on my bed when I heard a strong bang, followed by a chair being dragged. Then a scream. But it wasn't just any scream. It was the sound of a desperate person, someone really asking for help. I froze. It wasn't something normal. The next moment, everything went silent. A silence so heavy that I felt my breathing slow down, as if the air itself had stopped. I stayed there in bed, trying to convince myself that I hadn't heard what I heard. But deep down, I knew something terrible had happened. In the following days, the lady's son began to go out every day, alone, saying that his mother was sick and that she needed help. No one else saw you. I thought maybe she was really sick, or that her son had taken her to some hospital. But something bothered me. It didn't seem right. When a social worker tried to make contact, things started to get even stranger. She went there, but her son prevented her from entering. It was an aggressive blockade, as if he was hiding something. I knew the police needed to be called, and that's what I did. When the police arrived, my heart was beating fast. I knew something serious was happening, but at the same time, I had no idea what it could be. The officers knocked on the door and asked the man to open it, but he didn't answer. They insisted, and that's when his tone of voice became even more aggressive. The man was denying that there was any problem, saying that his mother was at home and that everything was fine. But the feeling in the air was dense, as if something was wrong in every word he said. The atmosphere became tense, and the police began to act more firmly. That's when they decided to break down the door. What they found on the other side was something none of us could ever imagine. The door opened with a throll, and what was behind it? Well, I don't even know how to describe it. The lady was there, but in a way that didn't seem human. The room was dirty, and the smell of decomposition was unbearable. She was lying in bed, but it seemed that she hadn't moved for days. The scariest thing, however, was her look, empty, distant, as if she were completely lost. She was so pale and thin that she no longer looked like the woman everyone in the neighborhood knew. The son, in turn, was no longer aggressive. He seemed too calm, as if you were in a trance. There was no kind of resistance, but he was immediately arrested, and the lady was taken to the hospital. The diagnosis was shocking. She was alive, but in such a serious state that it seemed like a miracle. What scares me the most to this day is that no one ever knew what really happened there. The police could not find out exactly what had happened between the son and the mother during those days. The man was arrested and, when interrogated, his version of what happened seemed disconnected. He claimed that his mother had been sick for weeks, that he was taking care of her in the best possible way, but his attitude and behavior were incredibly strange. He seemed to avoid talking about the last few days, always changing the subject when someone mentioned what had really happened in that house. The social worker, who was barred from entering, couldn't understand how he managed to hide everything for so long. No one in the neighborhood had any idea that something so terrible was happening there. That all seemed like a nightmare, and to this day, I can't understand how you were in such a serious state without anyone noticing before. What disturbed me the most was finding out later that you had been without eating for days. Her body was so fragile that it almost looked like time had devoured her. And the worst, in her house, there were signs that her son had tried to take care of her, but in a completely wrong way. There were medications scattered everywhere, but the lady was in a state of extreme malnutrition, without any real medical assistance. The strangest thing about all this was the fact that he seemed to genuinely believe that he was doing his best for her. He never explained what happened on the night of the scream, but the neighbors began to wonder if maybe he had tried something much darker to keep his mother under his control. No one knows to this day what really happened in that house, but what I know is that I will never look at that street the same way again. What happened in that house is still a mystery to everyone. The son was arrested and brought to trial, but no one ever knew what really went through his head. He was silent throughout the process, and the lady, in turn, never wanted to talk about the days when she was in such a critical state. She was taken to a rehabilitation center and, over time, managed to recover, but the physical and psychological marks remained. Until today, the neighborhood has never been the same, and I can't help but think about those last moments I witnessed. The feeling that something much darker was happening in that house still haunts me. And you, have you ever heard or witnessed something like this, where everything seemed normal, until suddenly you realized that it wasn't? What do you think really happened there?